The journey to the Helix Nebula took 18 days, not the expected 3 weeks. The White Dragon engineers had modified the Meridian's Hope's engines with technology that folded space in ways human science barely understood. Captain Chen stood on the bridge watching streams of colored gas and stellar debris flow past their ship as they navigated the nebula's outer reaches. "Sensors are picking up artificial structures ahead," Lieutenant Torres reported, "but the energy signatures are wrong somehow." Brightscale, who had remained on the bridge throughout their approach, suddenly stiffened. Its scales, which had been their normal pristine white, began to darken at the edges. "Something is very wrong here. I can sense corruption." "Define corruption," Webb said from his tactical station. "Weapons already powering up. Devourer influence. It leaves a kind of psychic stain on everything it touches. The fact that I can sense it from this distance means..." Brightscale's mental voice trailed off in what could only be described as horror. Captain Chen felt ice forming in her stomach. "Are you saying the Devourers found the Enclave?" "Not found. Consumed. And possibly converted." The main display showed them approaching what had once been a magnificent space city. Crystalline spires stretched for kilometers, connected by graceful bridges that seemed to be grown rather than built. But something was terribly wrong with the picture. The crystal was dark. The elegant curves were twisted, and a sickly purple light pulsed through structures that should have been gleaming white. "Life signs?" Chen asked. Torres checked his sensors twice before responding. "Present, but..." "Captain, these readings don't make sense. The life signs are there, but they're all wrong. The patterns don't match any known dragon physiology." Dr. Vasquez had completed her genetic modification process during the journey and now stood at a secondary science station, her enhanced senses picking up details that normal human instruments missed. "There's something else. The corruption isn't just affecting the physical structures, it's affecting space itself around the station. Meaning? Reality is thinner here. I can sense other dimensions bleeding through. This is what happens when Devourers establish a permanent foothold in normal space." Chief Engineer Park looked up from her console with alarm. "Captain, if the corruption spreads to our ship, it could affect our engines. We might not be able to leave. Recommendations? We maintain distance and use long-range sensors to gather what information we can," Webb suggested. "This looks like a trap." "It may be a trap," Brightscale agreed, "but we still need to find out what happened to the weapon research. If the Devourers have taken it, they could use it against the remaining free worlds." Captain Chen weighed their options. The mission parameters had changed dramatically, but the need for information remained critical. "Torres, can you establish communication with the station?" "I can try, but Captain, I'm not sure we want to announce our presence." "Do it. But keep it passive. Just listen for any transmissions." The next few minutes were tense as Torres worked to intercept communications from the corrupted station. When he finally looked up, his face was pale. "Captain, I'm receiving transmissions, but they're not in any dragon language. The pattern is, it's like mathematics made into sound, but mathematics that doesn't follow any logical rules." "Devourer communication," Vasquez said with certainty. "I can sense the wrongness of it even from here." "But there's something else," Torres continued. "Underneath the alien transmissions, I'm picking up what might be distress signals. Very faint, heavily encrypted, but the pattern matches White Dragon emergency codes." Brightscale's scales brightened slightly. "Survivors. There may be survivors in the lower levels of the station. Or it could be bait," Webb pointed out. "The Devourers are known for their psychological warfare tactics." Captain Chen studied the twisted space station on her display. Every instinct told her to retreat, to jump away from this place of corruption and horror. But the possibility that White Dragons were still alive in there, possibly with information about the weapon research, made retreat impossible. "We're going in," she decided, "but we do this carefully. Small team, maximum protection, and we maintain constant communication with the ship." "Captain, I should lead the team," Brightscale volunteered. "My resistance to corruption is much higher than any humans. Even Dr. Vasquez with her modifications. And if you're corrupted, we lose our primary liaison with the White Dragon resistance," Chen replied. "No. You stay here and coordinate. Webb, Vasquez, Park, and Kumar, you're with me." The boarding party prepared carefully, using environmental suits that had been modified with White Dragon technology. The modifications included psychic shielding that would provide some protection against Devourer mental attacks. Though Brightscale warned that prolonged exposure could overwhelm even these defenses, their shuttle approached the station through a docking bay that had once been beautiful, but was now twisted into impossible geometries. The walls seemed to bend in directions that shouldn't exist, and the lighting came from sources that cast shadows that moved independently of their objects. "Stay close," Captain Chen ordered as they made their way through corridors that defied human understanding of architecture. "And whatever you see, remember that the Devourers specialize in psychological warfare. Don't trust anything that seems too convenient or too familiar." They had been moving through the station for 20 minutes when they encountered their first sign of active corruption. Kumar was scanning for the source of the distress signals when he suddenly stopped, his face going blank. "Kumar," Webb called out. The communications specialist turned toward them, but his eyes were completely black. When he spoke, his voice had an odd harmonic quality that made their bones ache. "You should not have come here. This place belongs to the Hunger now." Webb's plasma rifle was in his hands instantly. Kumar fighted. "You're being influenced by something. Kumar is temporary. Soon all will serve the Hunger. The dragons thought they could hide from us. They thought their weapons could stop us. They were wrong." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her enhanced senses picking up the psychic emanations surrounding their compromised teammate. "It's not just Kumar. The whole station is alive with Devourer presence. They've turned this place into a kind of psychic amplifier. Can we break the influence?" Chen asked. "Maybe if we can find the source and disrupt it." The thing wearing Kumar's face smiled, an expression that didn't belong on human features. "You will find what you seek. The weapon is below in the deepest chambers. The dragons who built it are still alive, mostly. They would be happy to show you their work." "It's definitely a trap," Webb muttered. "Of course it's a trap," Chen replied. "But it might also be our only chance to learn what happened to the weapon research. We proceed, but we proceed smart." They left Kumar under Webb's watchful guard and continued deeper into the station. The distress signals were growing stronger, but so was the sense of wrongness that seemed to permeate every surface. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and occasionally they would catch glimpses of movement in their peripheral vision that vanished when they turned to look directly. The source of the distress signals turned out to be a heavily shielded laboratory in the station's core. The door was sealed with white dragon technology, but the lock mechanisms had been partially corrupted, creating a barrier that was neither fully secure nor completely breached. "I can override it," Park said, working with tools that combined human engineering with dragon technology. "But the moment I open this door, whatever's inside is going to know we're here." "Do it," Chen ordered. The door slid open to reveal a scene that would haunt Chen's dreams for years to come. The laboratory was vast, filled with equipment that seemed to blend organic and mechanical components in impossible ways. But it was the occupants that drew their attention. 3 white dragons were suspended in energy fields at the center of the room, their scales flickering between white and a sickly purple color. They were alive, but their minds were clearly fighting some kind of ongoing battle against corruption. Around them, holographic displays showed schematics for a weapon of unimaginable power, something that could apparently punch holes between dimensions. One of the dragons noticed their approach and managed to focus its eyes on them. When it spoke, its mental voice was filled with pain and desperate hope. "Humans, how did you find us?" "We're here to help," Vasquez said, stepping forward. "Can you tell us what happened?" "The Devourers came 3 months ago. They didn't attack directly. They sent emissaries. Dragons that had been corrupted turned into willing servants. They offered us partnership, shared knowledge. Some of our people, some believed them. And the weapon? Still functional, but we've been fighting to keep the knowledge from them. They want the dimensional breach technology. With it, they could open doorways directly into the core systems, bypassing all defenses." Captain Chen felt her blood run cold. If the Devourers could teleport their forces directly to the heart of galactic civilization, the war would be over before it began. "Can you transfer the weapon data to us?" she asked. "Yes, but the moment we do, the corruption will break through our mental defenses completely. We'll become their servants, and they'll know everything we know about your ship, your mission, Yo." The War Council that convened 3 months later brought together representatives from across the galaxy in a way that had never been attempted before. The location was a mobile command station constructed from the combined technologies of 17 different species, hidden in the debris field of an ancient battlefield where no one would think to look for signs of organized resistance. Captain Chen stood before a holographic display showing the current galactic situation. The red zones had expanded significantly, now covering nearly a quarter of the galaxy. But for the first time since the Devourer invasion began, there were signs of coordinated resistance. The weapon data we recovered from the Helix Nebula has been successfully distributed to 12 research facilities, Dr. Vasquez reported to the assembled representatives. 6 different species are now working on dimensional breach technology, each approaching the problem from their unique perspective. The council chamber was a marvel of diplomatic engineering. Species that breathed different atmospheres, operated at different temperatures, and communicated through methods ranging from harmonics to bioluminescent patterns were all able to participate thanks to White Dragon translation technology and human environmental engineering. Brightscale, now serving as the primary coordinator for White Dragon forces, projected a tactical assessment into everyone's consciousness simultaneously. The coordinated evacuations have been successful beyond our projections. We have relocated over 40 million civilians from threatened worlds, and more importantly, we have preserved the knowledge bases of 12 civilizations that would otherwise have been lost. A crystalline being from the Andorian collective pulsed with colors that the translation system rendered as skeptical inquiry. These successes are encouraging, but the fundamental problem remains. The Devourers continue to advance, and our defensive efforts merely delay the inevitable. That's where the dimensional breach weapon comes in, Chief Engineer Park explained, calling up technical schematics that floated in the air above the council table. Instead of trying to fight the Devourers in normal space where they have the advantage, we use their own interdimensional nature against them. A representative from the Zephyrian hive mind, speaking through carefully modulated sonic frequencies, expressed concerns that the translation system converted to. The risks of dimensional manipulation are extreme. What prevents such weapons from damaging the fabric of reality itself? Nothing, Captain Chen admitted bluntly. That's why we're not just building one weapon. We're building a network of them with safeguards built in. If any single weapon malfunctions or is captured, the others can contain the damage. Starmender, now serving as the senior White Dragon representative, shared memories of the most recent battles. The Devourers have adapted to our tactics more quickly than anticipated. They are no longer simply consuming worlds. They are converting them into staging areas for further attacks. We estimate they now have approximately 50 corrupted worlds serving as operational bases. Which brings us to the real purpose of this council, Chen continued. We're not here just to coordinate our defenses anymore. We're here to plan our offensive. The chamber fell silent. For most of the species present, the idea of attacking the Devourers directly was almost unthinkable. They were entities that consumed entire star systems. How do you attack something like that? The dimensional breach weapons aren't just defensive tools, Vasquez explained. Used properly, they can sever a Devourer's connection to our dimension, effectively banishing it back to whatever realm it came from. But to do that, we need to get close enough to establish target locks. Suicide missions, observed a representative from the thermal clans, whose homeworld orbited a red giant star. Not necessarily, Brightscale interjected. Human tactical doctrine has introduced concepts that are new to this galaxy. Strike and fate attacks, coordinated multi-vector assaults, the use of deception and misdirection. These are not tactics that any of our species developed independently. An elderly dragon from the traditional Drakmori faction, one of the few who had joined the resistance after witnessing Devourer attacks firsthand, projected grudging admiration. The humans think differently than we do. They see patterns and possibilities that we miss. It's not that we're smarter, Chen said diplomatically. It's that we're desperate enough to try things that more advanced civilizations would consider too risky, such as using corrupted Devourer technology against them. Every world they've corrupted contains processing nodes that connect back to their dimensional matrix. If we can infiltrate those nodes and upload specific types of data, you want to give the Devourers a computer virus, the Andorian representative observed with what might have been amusement. More than that, Park explained. We want to give them false information about our capabilities, our locations, our intentions. Make them think we're weaker than we are in some areas and stronger in others. Classic misdirection. Starmender's scales brightened with something approaching excitement. It could work. The Devourers are supremely confident in their abilities. They assume that any species they encounter will either flee or attack directly. A sustained deception campaign is outside their experience. What would you need for such an operation? Asked the Thermal Clan's representative. Volunteers willing to infiltrate corrupted worlds, advanced stealth technology, and enough dimensional breach weapons to make the deception believable, Chen replied. We're talking about a coordinated campaign across multiple star systems, with precise timing and communication. And if the deception fails? Then the Devourers learn our true capabilities and adapt accordingly, Brightscale admitted. But if we do nothing, they win anyway. At least this way we have a chance. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some species were ready to commit everything to the offensive campaign, while others preferred to continue focusing on evacuation and defense. But gradually a consensus began to emerge. We will need to vote, the Zephyrian representative finally said. This decision affects every free world in the galaxy. The voting process was complex, with each species having to reach internal consensus before contributing to the overall decision. But when the results were tallied, the outcome was clear. The galaxy's remaining free civilizations were willing to bet everything on humanity's unconventional approach to warfare. Then it's decided, Chen announced. Operation Starfall begins in 6 weeks. We'll coordinate simultaneous strikes on 7 corrupted worlds, while feeding false intelligence through the Devourer network. If we succeed, we'll have driven them back to the galactic rim and bought ourselves time to develop more advanced weapons. If we fail, at least we'll fail fighting, finished the elderly traditional dragon. Perhaps that is victory enough. As the council session ended and representatives began returning to their homeworlds to prepare for the coming offensive, Brightscale approached Captain Chen privately. There is something I have not told the council, the White Dragon said, its mental voice heavy with concern. The weapon data from the Helix Nebula contained more than just technical specifications. What do you mean? Hidden in the data structure were fragments of consciousness from the researchers who created it. They managed to encode part of themselves into the weapon's operating system before their corruption became complete. Chen felt a chill. Are you saying the weapon is alive? Not alive in any conventional sense, but aware. And it has been, whispering to the other research teams, sharing knowledge that goes beyond what we gave them. What kind of knowledge? Information about Devourer weaknesses that we didn't know existed. Battle strategies that none of our species ever developed. Technical innovations that shouldn't be possible with our current understanding of physics. That sounds like a good thing. It would be, if we could be certain the consciousness fragments hadn't been corrupted before they encoded themselves. There is a possibility that everything we've learned from the weapon data is part of an elaborate Devourer trap. Captain Chen stood silently for a long moment, watching the various alien ships departing from the mobile command station. Is there any way to verify the information? Only by testing it in actual combat against the Devourers. Then that's what we'll do. But Brightscale, if you're right, if this is all part of their plan, then Operation Starfall isn't just risky. It's a guaranteed disaster. I know. But Captain, the alternative is to assume the worst and abandon our only hope of victory. And that... Brightscale's scales dimmed slightly. That is not the human way, is it? Chen smiled grimly. No, it's not. We'll proceed with the operation, but we'll build in safeguards. If the weapon data is compromised, we'll detect it during the first strike and abort the others. And if the first strike team is lost before they can report back, then we'll know we've been betrayed and we'll find another way to fight. That's what humans do, Brightscale. We adapt. As Chen prepared to return to the Meridian's Hope, she reflected on how much had changed since that first encounter in the alien chamber. They had gone from rescuing a single persecuted dragon to coordinating the defense of an entire galaxy. The stakes had grown beyond anything she had imagined when she first decided to intervene. Operation Starfall began at exactly 800 Galactic Standard Time, with coordinated attacks on 7 corrupted worlds simultaneously. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the Meridian's Hope, watching tactical displays that showed fleet movements across half the galaxy as humanity's greatest gamble unfolded. Their target was a former White Dragon research station that the Devourers had converted into a processing hub. The plan was elegant in its simplicity: infiltrate the station, upload false intelligence into the Devourer network, plant the dimensional breach weapon, and escape before the corruption could take hold. All teams report ready, Communications Officer Torres announced. Kumar's replacement was competent, but Chen still felt the loss of their original team member. Dimensional breach weapon is armed and ready, Engineer Park reported. The consciousness fragments embedded in the weapon are active. I'm getting readings that suggest they're communicating with something. The weapon itself or something external? Dr. Vasquez asked from her science station. I can't tell. The psychic emanations are too complex for our instruments to decode. Brightscale moved closer to the weapon, its scales flickering through various shades of white and silver. I can sense them. The consciousness fragments are trying to warn us about something, but their message is fragmented and unclear. Warn us about what? Chen asked. The Devourers. They know we're coming. Not the details of our plan, but they know that something significant is about to happen. They've been preparing. How is that possible? Our communications have been secure. Our planning has been compartmentalized. Captain, Torres interrupted. I'm receiving emergency transmissions from Strike Teams 3 and 5. They're reporting that their target worlds appear to be abandoned. The corruption is still there, but there are no Devourer entities present. Chen felt ice forming in her stomach. It's a trap. They've evacuated the obvious targets and concentrated their forces elsewhere. But where? Webb asked from Tactical. The answer came from Brightscale, whose scales had suddenly gone completely black with horror. The core worlds. They're not defending their processing stations because they don't need them anymore. They've gathered enough resources to launch a direct assault on the galactic core. How many worlds are we talking about? Earth, New Terra, the Drakmori homeworld, the Andorian Collective's primary hive, every major population center in the galaxy. The scale of the trap was breathtaking. While the resistance forces were scattered across the galaxy attacking empty stations, the Devourers were preparing to consume the heart of galactic civilization in one coordinated strike. Can we warn them? Chen asked desperately. Not in time, Torres replied, working frantically at his console. Even using the Lightweb network, it will take hours to reach all the core worlds, and the Devourer attack will begin within minutes. Then we abort our mission and head for the core ourselves, Chen decided. Captain, Park said quietly, studying her readings from the dimensional breach weapon. I don't think we can abort. The weapon is drawing power from our ship's systems automatically. If I try to shut it down now, the feedback could destroy us. And if we complete the mission, then we'll have one functional dimensional breach weapon in the wrong place, while the Devourers destroy everything we're trying to protect. Chen looked around the bridge at her officers and crew. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, only to discover that they had been outmaneuvered from the beginning. The weapon data from the Helix Nebula had indeed been corrupted, not with false information, but with knowledge that the Devourers wanted them to have. They had been guided into building the perfect weapons to defeat an enemy that was no longer where they expected to find it. There is another option, Brightscale said slowly, its mental voice heavy with reluctance. The dimensional breach weapons are designed to sever a Devourer's connection to our dimension. But they could also be used to create connections. You mean open doorways between distant locations? Precisely. If we could link our weapon to the ones being deployed at the other target sites, we could create a network of dimensional gates. Instead of 7 isolated attacks on empty stations, we could redirect all 7 strike teams to the core worlds. Vasquez looked up from her calculations. The power requirements would be enormous. We'd be burning out our ship's systems, possibly destroying the weapon itself. And there's no guarantee that the strike teams could adapt to the new targets quickly enough, Webb added. It's still better odds than watching helplessly while the galaxy dies, Chen replied. Do it. What followed was the most complex military coordination in galactic history. Park worked to modify the dimensional breach weapon, while Torres established contact with the other strike teams through the Lightweb network. Brightscale served as a psychic relay, coordinating with white dragons across the galaxy to provide targeting data for the core worlds. The first dimensional gate opened above Earth, just as the Devourer fleet emerged from interdimensional space. Strike Team 7, originally assigned to attack a processing station, suddenly found themselves defending humanity's homeworld. Their ships, designed for infiltration and sabotage, were woefully outmatched against the Devourer dreadnoughts. But they weren't alone. The dimensional gate network allowed reinforcements to flow between battles instantaneously. A Thermoclan's battleship engaged in combat above the Andorian homeworld could receive support from Zephyrian fighters who had just finished their mission at New Terra. "It's working," Torres reported with excitement. "The strike teams are adapting to the new targets. We're seeing successful dimensional breach weapon deployments at 4 core worlds so far. And the Devourers? Confused. Their tactical coordination is breaking down as their forces are cut off from their dimensional matrix. But the victory came at a cost. The Meridian's hope was burning through its power reserves at an unsustainable rate. Hull plating was beginning to buckle under the strain of maintaining 7-dimensional gates simultaneously. "Captain," Park called out over the rising alarm sounds, "I'm reading cascade failures in the power distribution system. We've got maybe 10 minutes before we lose life support." "How long do we need to maintain the gates?" "Strike Team 4 is still engaging Devourer forces above the Drakmori homeworld. They need at least 15 minutes to complete their mission." Chen made the calculation instantly. They could save the ship or save the galaxy, but not both. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's communication system. "Prepare for emergency evacuation. We're going to hold these gates open as long as possible." "Captain," Brightscale said, moving closer to her position, "there may be another way. If I integrate directly with the weapon's consciousness fragments, I can supplement our power systems with my own life force." "Absolutely not. It's not a suicide mission. Dragons can survive in energy form for extended periods. I would be giving up my physical existence, but not my consciousness." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her console. "Brightscale, the consciousness fragments in the weapon are from dragons who were partially corrupted. If you merge with them, then I risk corruption myself. I understand the danger." "And you're willing to take that risk?" Brightscale's scales brightened to a pure, brilliant white. "Captain Chen, when you first found me in that cage, you risked everything to save one small dragon that you didn't even know. Now I have the chance to save an entire galaxy. How could I choose differently?" Before Chen could object, Brightscale moved to the dimensional breach weapon and placed its claws on the crystalline control matrix. Immediately, the dragon's physical form began to dissolve into streams of pure energy that flowed into the weapon. The effect was immediate. Power readings stabilized, the dimensional gates solidified, and the cascade failures in the ship's system stopped. But more than that, Chen could suddenly sense the battle raging across the galaxy as if she were present at every location simultaneously. Through the weapon's enhanced consciousness, she watched Strike Team 4 successfully deploy their dimensional breach weapon above the Drakmori homeworld, severing the attacking Devourer dreadnoughts from their dimensional matrix. She saw the last Devourer forces above Earth retreating as their command structure collapsed. She witnessed the successful defense of 6 core worlds and the salvation of billions of lives. But she also sensed something else. The consciousness that had been Brightscale was fighting a desperate battle within the weapon itself, struggling against the corrupted fragments that sought to turn the entire network against the galaxy it was supposed to protect. "Brightscale, can you hear me?" she called out. The response came not as words. Operation Starfall began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time, with coordinated attacks on 7 corrupted worlds simultaneously. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the Meridian's Hope, watching tactical displays that showed fleet movements across half the galaxy as humanity's greatest gamble unfolded. Their target was a former white dragon research station that the Devourers had converted into a processing hub. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Infiltrate the station, upload false intelligence into the Devourer network, plant the dimensional breach weapon, and escape before the corruption could take hold. "All teams report ready," Communications Officer Torres announced. Kumar's replacement was competent, but Chen still felt the loss of their original team member. "Dimensional breach weapon is armed and ready," Engineer Park reported. "The consciousness fragments embedded in the weapon are active. I'm getting readings that suggest they're communicating with something." "The weapon itself or something external?" Dr. Vasquez asked from her science station. "I can't tell. The psychic emanations are too complex for our instruments to decode." Brightscale moved closer to the weapon, its scales flickering through various shades of white and silver. "I can sense them. The consciousness fragments are trying to warn us about something, but their message is fragmented and unclear." "Warn us about what?" Chen asked. "The Devourers. They know we're coming. Not the details of our plan, but they know that something significant is about to happen. They've been preparing. How is that possible? Our communications have been secure. Our planning has been compartmentalized. Captain, Torres interrupted, I'm receiving emergency transmissions from Strike Teams 3 and 5. They're reporting that their target worlds appear to be abandoned. The corruption is still there, but there are no devourer entities present. Chen felt ice forming in her stomach. It's a trap. They've evacuated the obvious targets and concentrated their forces elsewhere. But where? Webb asked from Tactical. The answer came from Brightscale, whose scales had suddenly gone completely black with horror. The core worlds. They're not defending their processing stations because they don't need them anymore. They've gathered enough resources to launch a direct assault on the galactic core. How many worlds are we talking about? Earth, New Terra, the Drakmori homeworld, the Andorian Collective's primary hive. Every major population center in the galaxy. The scale of the trap was breathtaking. While the resistance forces were scattered across the galaxy attacking empty stations, the Devourers were preparing to consume the heart of galactic civilization in one coordinated strike. Can we warn them? Chen asked desperately. Not in time, Torres replied, working frantically at his console. Even using the Lightweb network, it will take hours to reach all the core worlds, and the Devourer attack will begin within minutes. Then we abort our mission and head for the core ourselves, Chen decided. Captain, Park said quietly, studying her readings from the dimensional breach weapon. I don't think we can abort. The weapon is drawing power from our ship's systems automatically. If I try to shut it down now, the feedback could destroy us. And if we complete the mission, then we'll have one functional dimensional breach weapon in the wrong place, while the Devourers destroy everything we're trying to protect. Chen looked around the bridge at her officers and crew. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, only to discover that they had been outmaneuvered from the beginning. The weapon data from the Helix Nebula had indeed been corrupted, not with false information, but with knowledge that the Devourers wanted them to have. They had been guided into building the perfect weapons to defeat an enemy that was no longer where they expected to find it. There is another option, Brightscale said slowly, its mental voice heavy with reluctance. The dimensional breach weapons are designed to sever a Devourer's connection to our dimension, but they could also be used to create connections? You mean open doorways between distant locations? Precisely. If we could link our weapon to the ones being deployed at the other target sites, we could create a network of dimensional gates. Instead of 7 isolated attacks on empty stations, we could redirect all 7 strike teams to the core worlds. Vasquez looked up from her calculations. The power requirements would be enormous. We'd be burning out our ship's systems, possibly destroying the weapon itself. And there's no guarantee that the strike teams could adapt to the new targets quickly enough, Webb added. It's still better odds than watching helplessly while the galaxy dies, Chen replied. Do it. What followed was the most complex military coordination in galactic history. Park worked to modify the dimensional breach weapon while Torres established contact with the other strike teams through the Lightweb network. Brightscale served as a psychic relay, coordinating with white dragons across the galaxy to provide targeting data for the core worlds. The first dimensional gate opened above Earth, just as the Devourer fleet emerged from interdimensional space. Strike Team 7, originally assigned to attack a processing station, suddenly found themselves defending humanity's homeworld. Their ships, designed for infiltration and sabotage, were woefully outmatched against the Devourer dreadnoughts, but they weren't alone. The dimensional gate network allowed reinforcements to flow between battles instantaneously. A Thermal Clan's battleship engaged in combat above the Andorian homeworld could receive support from Zephyrian fighters who had just finished their mission at New Terra. It's working, Torres reported with excitement. The strike teams are adapting to the new targets. We're seeing successful dimensional breach weapon deployments at 4 core worlds so far. And the Devourers? Confused. Their tactical coordination is breaking down as their forces are cut off from their dimensional matrix. But the victory came at a cost. The Meridian's hope was burning through its power reserves at an unsustainable rate. Hull plating was beginning to buckle under the strain of maintaining 7-dimensional gates simultaneously. Captain, Park called out over the rising alarm sounds. I'm reading cascade failures in the power distribution system. We've got maybe 10 minutes before we lose life support. How long do we need to maintain the gates? Strike Team 4 is still engaging Devourer forces above the Drakmori homeworld. They need at least 15 minutes to complete their mission. Chen made the calculation instantly. They could save the ship or save the galaxy, but not both. All hands, this is the captain, she announced over the ship's communication system. Prepare for emergency evacuation. We're going to hold these gates open as long as possible. Captain, Brightscale said, moving closer to her position. There may be another way. If I integrate directly with the weapon's consciousness fragments, I can supplement our power systems with my own life force. Absolutely not. It's not a suicide mission. Dragons can survive in energy form for extended periods. I would be giving up my physical existence, but not my consciousness. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her console. Brightscale, the consciousness fragments in the weapon are from dragons who were partially corrupted. If you merge with them, then I risk corruption myself. I understand the danger. And you're willing to take that risk? Brightscale's scales brightened to a pure, brilliant white. Captain Chen, when you first found me in that cage, you risked everything to save one small dragon that you didn't even know. Now I have the chance to save an entire galaxy. How could I choose differently? Before Chen could object, Brightscale moved to the dimensional breach weapon and placed its claws on the crystalline control matrix. Immediately, the dragon's physical form began to dissolve into streams of pure energy that flowed into the weapon. The effect was immediate. Power readings stabilized, the dimensional gate solidified, and the cascade failures in the ship's system stopped. But more than that, Chen could suddenly sense the battle raging across the galaxy as if she were present at every location simultaneously. Through the weapon's enhanced consciousness, she watched Strike Team 4 successfully deploy their dimensional breach weapon above the Drakmori homeworld, severing the attacking Devourer dreadnoughts from their dimensional matrix. She saw the last Devourer forces above Earth retreating as their command structure collapsed. She witnessed the successful defense of 6 core worlds and the salvation of billions of lives. But she also sensed something else. The consciousness that had been Brightscale was fighting a desperate battle within the weapon itself, struggling against the corrupted fragments that sought to turn the entire network against the galaxy it was supposed to protect. Brightscale, can you hear me? She called out. The response came not as words. The command center fell silent as every draconic warrior turned to stare at Zareth. Maya could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. King Vorthak slowly rotated his command throne to face his son, and Maya got her first full look at the most feared being in the galaxy. He was ancient, that much was clear. His scales had deepened to the color of old blood, and his eyes held the cold wisdom of centuries spent conquering worlds. When he smiled, it was like watching a predator bare its fangs. Real strength? Vorthak's voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. You speak of strength, broken son? You who cannot even fly properly among your own kind? I speak of the strength I learned from humans, Zareth replied, stepping forward. Maya stayed close behind him, trying to make herself invisible while simultaneously ready to act. The strength to protect the weak instead of destroying them. The strength to build alliances instead of demanding submission. Vorthak's laughter was genuinely amused. Humans? Those pathetic creatures have infected you with their weakness just as I predicted they would infect the galaxy. This is why they must be eliminated. Look at your tactical displays, father. Look at what your grand fleet faces. The king gestured dismissively at the screen showing the battle raging outside. A collection of inferior vessels and their human pets. My fleet will crush them within hours. Your fleet is fighting ships from 47 different worlds, Zareth said. Species that have been enemies for millennia, now fighting side by side. Former slaves standing alongside their liberators. Warriors who chose protection over conquest. That is what human influence has created. Maya watched the tactical displays with growing amazement. Ships she didn't recognize were indeed fighting alongside Earth's forces, their formations coordinated in ways that should have been impossible for such a diverse alliance. It was as if the entire concept of traditional galactic warfare was being rewritten before their eyes. Impossible alliances born of weakness. Vorthak snarled. They will crumble the moment they face real pressure. Will they? Zareth moved to one of the control consoles, his clawed hands dancing over the interfaces with practiced ease. Let me show you something, father. Computer display fleet communication channels. The air above them filled with a complex web of communication links. Maya gasped as she realized what she was seeing. Every ship in the human alliance was connected not just to military command, but to each other. Civilians calling out warnings to military vessels, cargo ships coordinating with warships, refugees giving tactical advice to professional soldiers. They are not just fighting as allies, Zareth said softly. They are fighting as family. Each ship knows that every other ship will come to their aid if needed. No one is expendable. No one is abandoned. Sentiment, Vorthek spat. It makes them weak, does it? Zareth's fingers found another control, and suddenly, the display showed the casualty reports. Your fleet has superior numbers and firepower, yet you are losing twice as many ships as they are. Why do you think that is? Maya could see the confusion rippling through the draconic command staff. This wasn't how battles were supposed to go. Superior force was supposed to triumph over inferior numbers. That was the natural order. I'll tell you why, Zareth continued. Because when a human ship is damaged, 3 others immediately move to protect it while it repairs. When a Centaurian vessel loses power, the nearest Andromedan trader shares energy. When refugees are threatened, warriors throw themselves into harm's way without hesitation. They fight not just to win, but to ensure that everyone comes home. Enough! Vorthek rose from his throne, his massive form radiating menace. You dare lecture me on warfare, Broken Prince? You have betrayed your own species for these parasites. I have found my own species, Zareth replied calmly. It just happens to include more than one biological form. The king's roar of rage shook the entire command center. Veltar! Seize the traitor and his pet. We will broadcast their execution to the fleet. Let them see what happens to those who embrace human weakness. But as the warriors moved to obey, alarms began shrieking throughout the ship. Emergency lights bathed everything in pulsing red as automated voices announced hull breaches, system failures, and intruder alerts. What is happening? Vorthek demanded. Maya couldn't help but smile. That would be my friends. Throughout the massive vessel, Cathara's team had reached the engine cores. The former slave engineer knew exactly which systems to disable to cripple the ship without destroying it entirely. Engine rooms that had hummed with power for centuries fell silent as she systematically shut down primary systems. In the weapons control centers, Mordecai led his fighters in a carefully orchestrated assault on the targeting computers. The ship's massive guns, designed to crack planetary surfaces, turned slowly toward other draconic vessels as the former warlord demonstrated why humans respected him despite his violent past. Betrayal, Vorthek snarled. You brought saboteurs aboard my ship. I brought hope, Zareth corrected. I brought beings who believe that there is a better way to live than under the rule of tyrants. The king lunged forward, his claws extended to tear his son apart. But Maya was ready. The small human stepped between them, and the first aid spray in her hands released a cloud of medical nanobots designed to treat draconic physiology. Vorthak stopped mid-strike, confused by the strange behavior of these microscopic machines as they began repairing minor injuries he hadn't even noticed. Maya had hoped that beings who saw only strength and violence might be confused by someone attempting to heal them in the middle of combat. You see, Zareth said to his father, even now, facing someone who wants to destroy her entire world, her first instinct is to heal rather than harm. That is not weakness, father. That is a strength you have never understood. The confusion lasted only moments before Vorthak's rage returned doubled. But those moments were enough. Zareth reached the main command console and placed his hands on the genetic scanners that controlled the entire fleet. I am Zareth, son of Vorthak, prince of the draconic houses, he declared, his voice carrying the formal cadence of royal authority. By right of blood and birth, I claim command of this fleet. The ship's computer, recognizing his genetic signature and royal standing, began transferring command codes to his control. Throughout the draconic fleet, captains received new orders from their own command systems. Impossible, Vorthak roared. You are cast out, broken. You have no authority. I am what you made me, Zareth said sadly. But I am also what they made me. He looked at Maya with something that might have been gratitude or love or simple recognition of shared purpose. And what they made me is someone who will not allow genocide in my name. His clawed fingers flew over the controls, sending new orders to every ship in the draconic fleet. Orders to stand down. Orders to withdraw. Orders to remember that honor could be found in protection as well as conquest. But even as he worked, Maya could see that some ships were not responding. Some captains were refusing the new commands, choosing loyalty to the old king over legal authority from the new prince. The battle was far from over. The command center erupted into chaos as half the Draconic fleet acknowledged Zareth's authority, while the other half remained loyal to his father. Maya watched the tactical displays with growing horror as she realized that their desperate gambit had split the enemy fleet but not stopped the battle. 19. Ship's continuing attack approach, reported a Draconic officer, his loyalty apparently shifting to whoever was currently in control of the command console. Remaining vessels holding position, awaiting orders. Father, Zareth said, his hand still working the controls. Call them off. End this madness before more lives are lost. Vorthak's response was a roar of pure rage. The ancient king launched himself across the command center, his massive claws aimed at his son's throat. Maya threw herself forward without thinking, her small form colliding with the Dragon King's leg. It was like being hit by a moving starship, but her impact was enough to throw off his aim. Zareth's claws met his father's in a shower of sparks as they clashed above the control console. For the first time in his life, the broken prince was fighting not for dominance or pride, but for something infinitely more precious. He was fighting for the right to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. You cannot win this way, Vorthak snarled as they grappled. Strength rules the galaxy. It always has. It always will. Then let me show you what real strength looks like, Zareth replied. He broke away from the combat and placed both hands on the communication console. His voice, amplified by the ship's systems, reached every vessel in both fleets. Warriors of the Draconic houses, he began, his words carrying the formal authority of his bloodline. I am Zareth, rightful heir to the throne of our people. I speak to you now not as your prince, but as someone who has learned what it means to be truly strong. Maya watched the tactical displays as ships throughout the fleet slowed their attacks, crews listening to words no Draconic prince had ever spoken before. For 10,000 years we have ruled through fear and conquest. We have told ourselves that the weak exist only to serve the strong, that mercy is weakness, that compassion is corruption. But I have lived among humans and I have learned something that changes everything. On the communication screens, Maya could see faces throughout the fleet. Draconic warriors born and raised to believe in the supremacy of strength, listening to their prince with expressions of confusion and growing wonder. The weak do not exist to serve the strong, Zareth continued. The strong exist to protect the weak. That is what makes strength meaningful. That is what makes it worth having. Lies. Vorthak screamed, lunging for the communication controls. But Maya was there again, this time armed with a neural disruptor that Mordecai had given her. The weapon was designed for beings much larger than herself, and the recoil knocked her across the room. But it bought Zareth the time he needed. Look at the battle around you, the prince commanded. Look at what we face. Dozens of species fighting together not because they fear us, but because they believe in something better. They believe that the galaxy has room for all of us, strong and weak together. Maya picked herself up from the floor, her shoulder screaming in pain from the disruptor's recoil. Through the viewports she could see the battle continuing to rage, but something was changing. Some of the Draconic ships were breaking off their attacks, their crews apparently swayed by their prince's words. I give you a choice, Zareth said, his voice carrying to every ship in the fleet. Continue this path of conquest and fear and watch as the galaxy rises against us. Or choose a new path. Choose to be strong in order to protect rather than to destroy. Choose to be worthy of the power we possess. The response was not immediate, but it was profound. One by one, Draconic vessels began dropping out of attack formation. Weapons powered down. Engines went to standby. The most feared fleet in the galaxy was choosing a different path, but not all of them. 7 ships, the most fanatically loyal to the old ways, continued their attack run toward Earth's defensive lines. Their captains had made their choice, and that choice was to die as conquerors rather than live as protectors. The diehards, one of the Draconic officers reported, they will not be swayed. Maya watched those 7 ships accelerating toward the human fleet, their weapons charging for what would be devastating strikes against Earth's defenders. Even 7 Draconic dreadnoughts could inflict catastrophic damage before they were stopped. Can we stop them? She asked. Zareth's expression was grim. Not from here. The weapons lockouts I installed will prevent this ship from firing on human vessels, but those 7 are operating independently now. Maya felt despair beginning to creep in. They had come so far, accomplished so much, only to watch helplessly as 7 ships full of fanatics prepared to carry out mass murder. Then her communication device crackled to life with a familiar voice. Maya, can you hear me? It was Admiral Chen, calling from the bridge of Earth's flagship. Around him, Maya could hear the controlled chaos of a military command center in the middle of a desperate battle. Admiral, I'm here. 7 ships are still attacking. We couldn't stop them all. We see them. Maya, I need you to know something. What you and your people have accomplished today, splitting their fleet, turning their own weapons against them, it's already saved millions of lives. You've given us a fighting chance. But those 7 ships will be met by every volunteer vessel in our fleet. Admiral Chen interrupted. Maya, you taught us something today. You showed us that we don't have to be the strongest to win. We just have to be willing to stand together. Through the command center's viewports, Maya watched as the human alliance fleet moved to intercept the attacking draconic vessels. But it wasn't just human ships anymore. Centaurian cruisers, Andromedan traders, refugee vessels from a dozen worlds, all moving together in a coordinated defense that should have been impossible. The battle that followed was brief, but decisive. The 7 draconic ships, for all their individual power, found themselves outnumbered 20-1 by an alliance that fought with perfect coordination. Ships that had been enemies for millennia covered each other's flanks. Merchant vessels shared shield power with military cruisers. When one vessel was damaged, 3 others immediately moved to protect it. It was everything Zareth had told his father about human influence made manifest in combat. The strong protecting the weak, the many defending the few, hope triumphing over fear. When the last fanatic ship surrendered rather than be destroyed, a cheer went up throughout the human fleet that could be heard even in the draconic command center. Vorthak, slumped in his throne and looking suddenly very old, stared at the displays with something like incomprehension. How? He whispered. How do the weak defeat the strong? Maya limped over to him, her injured shoulder making every step painful. The ancient king looked at her with eyes that held no threat now, only confusion. They don't, she said gently. The weak don't defeat the strong. They make the strong remember what strength is actually for. She looked around the command center, at the draconic warriors who were beginning to understand that the galaxy had changed forever, that the old ways of conquest and domination were ending. Your son is the strongest person I've ever met, Maya told the fallen king. Strong enough to change his mind when he learned a better way. Strong enough to stand against his own father when it was necessary. Strong enough to choose protection over conquest. Vorthak looked at his son, who was now coordinating with the human fleet to ensure the peaceful withdrawal of the remaining draconic forces. I do not understand this strength, the old king admitted. That's okay, Maya said. Understanding can come later. What matters now is that the killing stops. Outside the viewports, the fleets were separating. The crisis was over. Earth was safe. The galaxy had taken its first steps toward a future where strength served compassion, instead of the other way around. Maya collapsed into a nearby chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She was just a waitress from New Angeles who had helped an injured customer. She had never imagined that such a simple act of kindness could change the fate of worlds. But then again, she reflected, maybe that was exactly how change was supposed to happen. One act of mercy at a time, one choice to help instead of harm, one decision to see strength in protection rather than destruction. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Maya stood behind the counter of her diner, pouring coffee for what had become the most unusual collection of regular customers in human space. The neon sign outside still flickered and the vinyl booth still had tears in them, but everything else had changed. Order up, called Kethara from the kitchen, where the former slave engineer had discovered an unexpected talent for cooking. Her cetacean manipulator arms could flip pancakes with a precision that amazed human customers and aliens alike. Maya smiled as she delivered breakfast to a table where a Centaurian trader was teaching a young draconic diplomat how to play chess. 6 months ago, the two species had been mortal enemies. Now they argued good-naturedly over whether castling was a legitimate strategy or a form of cowardice. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up to see Zareth entering. He still couldn't fly properly. His wings would never be fully functional. But he moved with a confidence that had been entirely absent when she first found him bleeding on her floor. Your Majesty, Maya said with mock formality, which earned her a gentle swat from his tail. I have told you repeatedly that the title is unnecessary here, Zareth replied, settling into the booth that had become his unofficial office. This is the one place in the galaxy where I can simply be Zareth. Maya poured him as usual a blend of earth coffee and draconic stimulants that would probably kill any human who tried it, and sat down across from him. How did the negotiations go? Better than expected. The Andromedan Trade Federation has agreed to the Mutual Protection Pact. That makes 47 systems now committed to the new alliance. Maya shook her head in wonder. 47 star systems, dozens of species, all united by the simple principle that the strong should protect the weak instead of exploiting them. It was the kind of change that should have taken centuries, but somehow it was happening in real time. Your father still refuses to participate? Zareth's expression grew sad. He has agreed to an armistice and withdrawn draconic forces from conquered territories, but he will not join the alliance. He says he is too old to change his understanding of strength. Maybe understanding isn't required, Maya suggested. Maybe acceptance is enough. Through the diner's windows, they could see the new reality taking shape. The spaceport that had once handled primarily human traffic now hosted ships from across the galaxy. Former refugees had become diplomats. Traders had become mediators, and warriors had become protectors. The transformation hadn't been without its challenges. There were still systems that refused to abandon the old ways of conquest and dominance. There were still beings who saw compassion as weakness and mercy as corruption. But for every voice raised in favor of the old order, 10 more spoke for the new. Maya, Zareth said, his voice unusually formal, there is something I need to tell you. She looked up from her coffee to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What is it? The Alliance Council has voted. They want to offer you a position as Ambassador for Humanitarian Affairs. You would coordinate relief efforts, refugee assistance, and protection services across all member systems. Maya blinked in surprise. That's a huge honor and responsibility. You would be very good at it. You have already proven that you can see potential where others see only problems, find strength where others see only weakness. Maya looked around her diner, at the collection of former outcasts who had become her extended family, at the simple life she had built serving coffee and kindness in equal measure. The offer was tempting. A chance to help people on a galactic scale, to be part of something that was reshaping civilization itself. What did you tell them? She asked. Zareth smiled. I told them that they would have to ask you themselves and that they should be prepared for you to negotiate. Negotiate? You are not the same person who found a broken prince bleeding in her diner, he said. You have learned to see your own worth, your own power. If you take this position, it will be on your terms. Maya considered this. It was true that she had changed over the past months. The scared waitress who had been overwhelmed by the idea of helping one injured alien had become someone who could coordinate a galactic resistance movement. She had discovered strengths she never knew she possessed. But she had also learned something else. Real strength wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was about showing up every day, offering help to whoever needed it, creating spaces where people could find safety and acceptance. I'll consider their offer, Maya said finally, but I have some conditions, such as, this diner stays open. Whatever else I do, wherever else I go, this place remains exactly what it is, a sanctuary for anyone who needs it. Zareth nodded approvingly. I thought you might say that. I have already purchased the building. Consider it my contribution to galactic peace. Maya laughed, the sound bright and warm in the familiar space. Outside, the galaxy was changing in ways that none of them could have imagined. Ancient enemies were becoming allies. Former slaves were becoming leaders, and the weak were discovering that they had always been stronger than they knew. But inside Murphy's diner, some things remained constant. There was always coffee brewing, always a meal for someone who was hungry, always a safe place for those who had nowhere else to go. A year later, when historians tried to pinpoint the moment that galactic civilization shifted from conquest to cooperation, they would point to great battles and historic treaties, to speeches by leaders and declarations by governments. They would be wrong. The real moment of change happened at 2:47 a.m. in a small diner in New Angeles, when a human waitress looked at a bleeding alien and decided that kindness was more important than fear, that mercy was stronger than hatred, that everyone deserved a chance to become something better than what they were. Maya Chen never did take the ambassador position. though she consulted for the Alliance Council whenever they needed someone to remind them what they were really fighting for. She remained exactly what she had always been, a waitress who served coffee and hope in equal measure, who created a space where anyone could come in from the cold and find warmth. And throughout the galaxy, in refugee camps and diplomatic stations, in schools and hospitals and shelters, beings who had learned the human way of looking at strength continued the work she had started. They protected the weak, helped the lost, and refused to abandon anyone who needed them. They were, all of them, proof that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest acts of kindness. Sometimes saving the galaxy starts with helping just one person who stumbles through your door on a rainy night, asking for nothing more than the simple mercy of not being turned away. Sometimes strength really is just about refusing to let anyone bleed alone on your floor. The end.